Hey guys, so last time I told you about how I was born and raised in West Africa, and I spent my early childhood there and a lot of years there. I think it was 11 or 12 years of my life in total I spent in West Africa. So that's a little bit of an overview of my early childhood. Again, my parents were just these and still are these awesome, just very strong Christian people. I mean, their love for Jesus Christ and His gospel and what He's done in their lives is their driving factor, their driving motivation. It is their engine. Their relationship with Jesus Christ comes first, regardless. I mean, before anything. It's such a motivation to myself and my siblings. It's incredible. Anyway, so I'm the youngest child of 5. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister. I forgot there for a minute. And they live, they're all scattered across the United States, and I love them to death. I wish I got to see them more, but hey, life happens, so it is what it is. And from an early age, I professed Christ as my Savior because that was who my family was. I was watching my parents, lead people to Christ, and they planted this church in a little town called Seba, Burkina Faso. Shout out to y'all out there. And so that was, it was just, it was what you did. It was who we were. And so I professed a knowledge, I professed salvation in Jesus Christ at an early age. But it became clear to me later on down the road that it wasn't my own faith. I was just hanging on to my parents' coattails, as it were. So fast forward a few years, and we came back to the States for an indefinite period of time when I was going into... Oh no, I'm sorry, you need to hear about my 6th grade year. So in my 6th grade year, my parents sent me to a boarding school. It was a missionary boarding school in the capital city of Niger, Niamey. And that year was probably one of the most defining years of my life, even though I can't remember entire chunks of it. So it's hard to tell you what happened. It was so involved in that year in just like 2 minutes, but I'm going to try. So I went into the year just this happy, kid in my 6th grade year, and I made friends and I knew some people, and I had siblings there at the time, so it wasn't like I was all alone. But I don't know how to describe it. I started lying pathologically. I'm not sure why. I just every time I said something, it was a lie. It felt like, and it got to the point where I just lied and I lied and I lied and I lied. I mean, I couldn't control it, and I didn't know. It got to the point where I didn't know whether what I was. I didn't know what was the truth anymore. I mean, honestly. And then I started stealing stuff. I mean, it was like kleptomania, for crying out loud. I started stealing stuff, and it was just like I started stealing more and more stuff, and I started giving people things that I had stolen from other people. What messed up is that? But then later in the year, I started to have this dream. And in this dream, I don't know how to describe it except it was hell. In this dream, I was climbing this rock face, this sheer rock face. It was so sheer that it was almost leaning over backwards. And this rock face didn't have any handholds or any way to climb this thing. It was like impossible to climb. Literally, I felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails. And I was climbing, and every handhold up, every movement I made was painstaking and painful and felt impossible. But below me was, I don't know how to describe it except this inky blackness, and just instinctively I knew that if I let go, if I stopped climbing and I fell, I was gonna be in hell. It put this fear in my soul. It gripped me from the bottom of my heart. It was the most intense fear I've ever felt in real life or otherwise. And it was just this dream. But somehow intuitively I knew that if I could just get to the top of this cliff, I would be safe. Salvation was at the top of this cliff. I'd be okay. I could, and it was just this gripping fear that was driving me to the top of this cliff. So I climbed, and blood was pouring down out of my fingernails, but I couldn't stop. And every night this dream recurred, and it was like this dream kept progressing. It wasn't like I started over. And finally, after nights and nights, I don't know how many weeks of this dream happening, I got an arm over the ledge. And I've never felt such a sense of victory wash over me as in that moment in a dream state. And, but then the blackness grabbed my feet and pulled me back down. Imagine, you know, the scene in a horror movie where there's somebody like laying on the ground in a dark hallway and they, you know something's coming, but you don't know what it is, and then all of a sudden they're drag screaming backwards. Imagine that, but down a cliff face, you know, nail on chalkboard kind of deal. I mean, it was just the most intensely horrifying feeling I've ever felt in my life, but I started climbing again. I managed to grab a hold and climb again, and this was just recurring and over, and this blackness was creeping up the cliff behind me, underneath me, and it caught up to my feet, and then it crept up my legs, and it was just this intense. Anyway, long story short, it got to the point where I was having this dream while I was awake. It got to the point where I couldn't tell whether I was awake or asleep anymore during this time, and it was just so intense, and eventually I realized that I wasn't in control of my own actions anymore. There was something or somebody or some being in me controlling what I did and said. And it literally felt like there are times during the day or the week that I would wake up and be in control of myself, and then I'd go back under. And I would come out of this and realize I was doing something and then go back under it. And there was nothing I could do about it. There was no control I had over my own actions. This was all happening to me. Somebody was pulling the strings, and it wasn't me. And I truly believe that I was possessed by a demon. I had opened doors into my life that, whether they be unintentional or not, I don't know, but I had opened doors into my spiritual self, into myself that had allowed this spirit to take over and control me. And that year was the most horrible year of my life. But thank God that we left after my 6th grade year, and we came back to the States. And it was like this possession left me. I firmly believe that it was a localized demon, a localized spirit that was confined to a certain area geographically. That's a debate we can have another day. But I know what I experienced, and it was gone when we finally came back to the States. But that wasn't the end of my journey. See, doors had opened in my life, and I had made decisions and done things, and to affect me to this day, but affected many of the decisions I made in the next few years. And I'll get into that in my next video. This was already gone a little long, but thanks for watching. And that's part 2 of who I am and kind of my life growing up and how things have shaped me. That's one of the biggest momentous years of my life. And I truly believe that shaped me and opened doors and turned me into the person I became in middle school and high school, and led me to some of the decisions, a lot of the decisions that I made in the coming years. But we'll get into that later. So I'm Jeremie, and we'll talk to you soon. God bless.